Hey everyone, it's Rob Beeler. I'm here with Matthew Goldstein, MSG, as we call him, and he's we've got the latest version of what I saw happen, the Q2 2018 version of the report, and hopefully you have that in front of you. If you don't, you should get on the email list and make sure you're doing it. There's a lot of great information, and what Matt and I want to do is just have a conversation, go through some of the highlights. I have thoughts on what Matthew put down. Matthew's got thoughts on
I
what
have
Matthew.
thoughts also.
Exactly. And so we're just going to have a conversation about that. So, why don't you put it in context, Matt? What did you see in Q2?
Okay, let me just tell you a little bit about how I got here on this whole
Yeah.
little what I saw happen email. So this is my 13th version. I went back and found version number one, and it was about 6 bullet points. So it's sort of getting better and better or deeper and deeper as time goes on. It's really a focus, as I wrote, on advertising and marketing in primarily the US. And I try to make it pithy and curated recap in bullet points, because I think that's how people really read about what I saw happen in Q2 2018. And it's mostly from conversations I had. I've added podcasts I listen to because I think they go deep into what people are talking about. Every once in a while, there's an article read I put in here. And I send it out to my colleagues. I think I'm up to about 800 or 900 people I send it to. I'm not going to send it out until after July 4th, so people are actually back from work. And I think it's a pretty good recap of what's going on in my little advertising marketing, probably the digital advertising marketing ecosystem. Additionally, I'm going to put out a quarterly a recap on publicly traded companies in advertising and marketing on the 45th day of the quarter, which I've done previously. I'm going to try to do one on retail as well with John Mendez. And hopefully, Rob, if you like to, we can do interviews on those as well.
Yeah. No. Again, I always enjoy these conversations, and there's a part where I just think it's great that you're taking the time to think this through, right? I mean, again, there are people who are covering our industry, and you do it from a media perspective, you fall in the media's trap. You just fill the hole, the editorial hole. So to sit there and actually think about these things and to kind of formulate that is always great. And I'm more interested in the long term than I am the short term with a lot of this.
And then one more piece, the way I started doing this for the past couple quarters is starting Q2, which is today, I actually start doing my Q3 analysis. Sorry, starting Q3, I do my Q3 analysis. So it's as the quarter goes on, I have this Google Doc. I sort of edit it every single day. And when I get to the ends of the quarter, that's when I sort of refine the whole thing.
Got it. Great. So you broke this out in a number of sections, and what we're going to do is go through them section by section, and again, just hit the highlight points. I have things that I saw that I thought were of particular interest.
Yeah, you're going to ask me the hard questions, I know.
Well, what I can also say is that for some of it I'll add to, right? So GDPR is something I probably have been watching a little bit more than you have, just from the fact that I deal with a lot of European companies as well.
And that's also nice because I put in my second bullet point, GDPR is a non-issue for US-based companies. So of course, we're going to go back and forth on that one.
Yeah, and there's what I've picked up on has been that if you talk to anyone on the legal side, there is a part of wait and see, right? Because I think that's why
I think we're all waiting until someone gets sued.
Right, and it's interesting that there's some stuff going on with Facebook in the news in the last couple of days. I still don't even think that that's big enough. I think to your very point, there'll be some kind of data breach. There'll be something so egregious that then is where the regulators put all their effort and go after it. And because you hit on it as well, consumers don't care that much about privacy, right? And so I think they do in Europe, but even there, I don't think, we're not seeing, we're seeing some court cases happen or whatever, but this isn't like a mob mentality. The note that popped up in my head, Matt, on what you said about privacy, you ask a person if they care about privacy, they say, hell yes, right?
Actions speak louder than words, Rob, though.
That is correct, right? And if you ask them about privacy online, I think they have the same approach they have about the government, which is they just assume that all their data is just being taken and it's just the way of the world, and they just kind of accepted it. Where I think that gets interesting is they personify it, right? I I was with civilians this past weekend, right? Like people outside the industry, as I like to call them, civilians. At a wedding party, and you heard animosity toward Facebook, less about like the privacy thing kind of held on to it a little bit, but it really wasn't the issue why people, they just feel like it's tainted waters, right? They just
they're still using it, and marketers are still buying. So it's like, again, actions speak louder than words.
That's right. That's right. So that's the part, right? Is that they care, but they aren't going to act on that. That they're more about the utility of what they're getting done. If you can connect me with my family, take whatever you need. I just want to be connected to my family,
Yes.
right? And I think that's
so
interesting.
When you go to the summary, you picked on GDPR as your point.
Yeah.
I always for every category, I try to have sort of a pithy little bullet point what I think happened. And for me, my summary this quarter is sort of not advertising related, but I think it's the move to DTC, direct to consumer, that I've seen been happening over and over and over in this ecosystem, right? So, and DTC, I think 99% of the time is not advertising supported at all. So in some ways, my marketing and advertising recap, my first headline is there's a move to DTC.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's interesting.
And I think sometimes I get to see things before other people because I talk to so many people in the industry, and that sort of as I'm talking this through with you, Rob, like that's concerning. But again, then it's opportunities as well.
Yeah. Well, one thing, let's say that a truism that may be changing, and again, I think you might be ahead of the curve on this, is that, people have ad budgets, they're going to spend ad budgets. But if they can start putting that budget toward having a direct relationship with the consumer, that might be the way that marketing starts to shift toward, again, advertising or this direct to consumer as a utility, right?
Right.
Like,
and then American consumers are moving to a small number of relationships they have for a monthly fee. Entertainment, right? It's Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. Food, it's whatever is going to be able to deliver to your house for a meal. Clothing, Stitch Fix, and everything else. Cars, I'm reading about doing the same thing. So if everything is direct to consumer and you pay a fee, for the most part, advertising is not needed. However, the big caveat is all these DTC companies have to spend a fortune in advertising to be able to get their clients. So it is advertising related, just in a different way.
Right. It's coming in from a different direction. I thought the other note that I got, and again, let's, any other ones you want to highlight, the global economy. I think that's also a part. I know as part of your other report that you do, where you're looking at how advertising spends, and if you want to, you can talk to that point. There's definitely some concern, and I think people kind of holding back a little bit right now with how they're going to spend their money. To see, again, it's everyone's kind of playing a waiting game with everything. Is the economy going to be strong? Is digital going to clean its act up, or all these things? Yeah. And so why wouldn't you take that money and just spend it the minute you need it and not sit there and lock your money up elsewhere?
Right. And I'm not an economist, but I just feel like, have we hit a peak in what's happening in the global economy, and what does that mean going forward?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a big thing to watch. All right, so that was, again, those are some great points out of the summary. Obviously you can't do anything with our conversations in ad tech or in tech without talking about the platforms, the aggregators, Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and so forth. I think the point you've heard it elsewhere or whatever, but it's obviously a key point is that everything now is a reaction to Google, Facebook, and Amazon in terms of strategy, right? Yes. You can't, I'd almost sit there and say, if you heard an earnings call that didn't have someone mention how this is a reaction to them, you might see it as
that's actually a really good point. And if I do my quarterly publicly traded companies, I'll actually see how many times every company mentions Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
I think that would be an amazing count.
That's a great chart, and I'm sure it's the hockey stick up and to the right.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought the one thing that could be really interesting in what you said was when the platforms roll out viewability and guaranteed viewability. I remember when Google did this with YouTube and skippable ads, and everyone on the publisher side's like, how could we afford to do that? Well, they can, right? And they can afford to just do a transact on viewability.
They don't have inventory constraints.
That's right. That's right.
So it doesn't matter. They can go out. But the problem is, like I wrote in there, I think each one has a slightly different definition. And there's not a governing body like the IAB is going to say this is a definition. It's like, this is my definition. This is what I'm doing.
Right. Right. And so I think obviously that means, again, marketers are going to have to be trying to figure out what's the right mix there.
Yep.
I got to go to the Mark Zuckerberg hiring Obama. That certainly does.
Which Obama?
I want to hear more.
It could be either Obama. It doesn't matter. Barack or Michelle.
That's right. That's right. So is that just expound on that one? That's too much fun.
Well, I think it goes back to Congress with Zuckerberg. They couldn't even ask intelligent questions. How can they regulate him? All the feedback. It feels like, Facebook gets beat up every week. Google gets beat up not as much anymore. And then if Zuckerberg just wanted to make a big hire to sort of put Facebook on the map of trying to do the right things, I think an Obama can make sense. I don't think he'll do it. Just like throwing it out there again, being provocative.
I love it because it also just goes to Mark. Well, and again, let's say that the average consumer is probably not paying as much attention, but if they watched any of that congressional stuff, Zuckerberg comes across as a robot. He isn't someone you'd feel like, wait a second, he's a person I could trust with my data. I'm not sure he's a person. Right. I mean, he was as stiff as one can be. Bringing in someone likable.
Who besides Obama, Barack, or Michelle do you think could be the chairman and actually help out?
Yeah,
it's hard, right? But those two make sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. I like it. No, listen. Least likely of what you said to happen, most likely to be the really most interesting thing that could happen. So I'm right. Me. I want to bet on that one happening.
Okay, so now as I was preparing for this meeting, it used to be the duopoly, and then it's the triopoly with Facebook, Google, and Amazon. I think there's a couple players out there who can emerge in a bigger way. Right. And as I think about this more and more, the companies I really like are Roku, right? Mm-hmm. Spotify, and/or Sonos.
Interesting.
I think they are all really interesting plays, and I think one of the big guys is going to come in and swoop in and buy them shortly.
Yeah. Well, it's such, and we're going to talk more about the AT&T App Nexus thing later.
That's my bonus number 3. Yep.
That's right. We're going to save that to the end, right? But you do have some other ones in here, or just overall acquisition companies or whatever.
Well, let me throw out another interesting one that I think is interesting. There's Google, Facebook, Amazon. And I'll even add a new one right here. Google has YouTube. YouTube's probably $10 billion in revenue. If Google had to divest of YouTube, then you have player number 4. Okay.
Right.
Facebook has Instagram. If Facebook had to divest of Instagram, you have player number 5.
Right.
And Amazon sort of down there, which is someone no one's talking about. I'm going to add it to this report before it goes out. Amazon has Twitch.
Right.
So each one of them have sort of like 2 components. They're not going to have to divest of them unless someone makes them, but there could be 6 instead of 3, which might, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it'd be a whole different marketplace.
Well, I'll just throw out my Twitch, comment on that which goes to why you don't take my investing advice. When I had a friend move to Twitch early days, I didn't get it. And and obviously I'm looking at it going like in esports is obviously good. I've got kids going toward college, and I'm wondering, do I want them more on the computer so that they can get a scholarship to play World of Warcraft all day long?
Have them write code.
Well, that is for sure. Absolutely. I thought so I thought the 5 thing was definitely there. One company you don't mention is Oath. And
no. I added it in after I sent you my little note.
Okay. So
I have a pointer here. I have a pointer that says, I think I said that I like AT&T's media acquisition strategy much more than that of Verizon.
Yeah.
So I think what AT&T's doing with DirecTV and Turner is much more interesting than what Verizon did with AOL, Yahoo, and Oath.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of confidence in what Oath is doing and will be doing.
I think you hint at there when people are part of media and they try to be tech players, they tend to not get it right. Tech players don't think of media and they tend to get it. They go right past it. I mean, that's Google, right? That's Facebook. We're not media, and so they tend to win this game. And I've always just thought Oath as a bunch of media people with a bunch of technology and trying to connect all the parts.
But they're having the hardest time connecting everything. It's so hard.
That's right.
They have AOL and Yahoo, and they have 5 different platforms. I don't even know what the names are anymore. Trying to put together is so complicated. And then you have the other players like Google and Yahoo and Amazon pretty much building it all from scratch with hundreds and hundreds of engineers.
And it's that seems to be obviously the way. And you've always talked about, and it's not in this note, but it always is worth referencing, is that the companies that have engineers and invest in engineers are the ones
that I have to go back and do my little engineering chart.
No, you don't. You don't need to add that. The point was made.
Once a year. Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's one of the strongest point. One of the things that you've said in the past. Is there anything on the platform?
Yes. I have one more question. Like, whatever happened with eBay? Remember they were neck and neck with Amazon, and they had a media business as well. Like, what happened to them?
I don't know, and I will tell you every once in a while it pops in my head where I'll go like, I want something and it's not on Amazon, and I kind of go like, where would I get it? Right, to your point, I think they have any mind share left in that world. So yeah.
And then one more piece down the platforms, voice is going to be huge. Just no one's figured out how to monetize it yet, but it will be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the proliferation of that has been huge. Absolutely. So in talking about marketing, I think the one thing that and I want you to expound on the points you want to make on this. The one thing, of course, I want you to define for anyone who gets the email and doesn't know about multi-touch attribution and DDA.
Data-driven attribution.
Right. And so, that's the point is obviously something we've all been fighting if we get on the media side for some time is last click is not the right way. I just want to make sure we got those definitions out there.
And it's just like, and I wrote in there, it's just silly that so many advertisers are still using last click attribution, but it's what they've been doing for the past 10 years. And to move to multi-touch, or also called data-driven, it's really complicated. And there's not that many companies out there left who do it well, especially with the walled gardens.
Yeah, that's right.
As you do look at MTA, DDA, you do see how shares shift, and it makes, your buying decisions so much better.
Absolutely.
It's not a simple proposition. It's very complicated and very cost intensive.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think that, we, so at the ops event for Ad Monsters, we had Chris Cable from Diageo talk. And it's really interesting to hear someone who is measuring attribution for digital as well as out of home. He's
good luck.
Overall picture, right? Yeah. And so, when you talk to him about in-app measurement, right, he kind of just goes like, look, I'm trying to decide how much I spend in Times Square, right? Like, talking about viewability, I think in those terms, not this little piece. So it's almost, again, a call that as an industry, we have to get better at raising our game to where someone like him even pays attention to all our squabbling about how you measure stuff. We have to go to macro level. We can't, this micro level stuff is just.
And then one of the pieces that I like the best is when you use Facebook. Facebook can actually tell you how many people actually went to the physical store, not bought or maybe bought, but actually went to the physical store, which I think is a good connection as well.
Yeah.
But even that's complicated.
Absolutely.
And one piece that we alluded it up top, like this whole direct to consumer, right? They always need to spend a fortune marketing up front. And what do? They start with Facebook and Google, right? You see this over and over, and they sort of exhaust that for DR. Then they go offline with brand building for TV or outdoor, and they all follow the exact same model. And at some point, that's going to get saturated. And it's probably also, floating the entire Facebook, Google boat of more advertising revenue coming there. But at some point, that's just going to have to change. I don't think it can go on forever.
Right. So let's talk agencies and consulting houses.
I actually linked these two together because I think they're so intertwined now.
So the one thing I am curious about, you made the point about publishers needing to spend more time. This is one of your your later points. They should be spending
Yep.
more time in consulting houses. You have experience with this. I'm hoping. I don't. Of how do these is engaging with a consulting house the same as talking to an agency? Is it a different kind of conversation? Are you bringing different people in that conversation? How does someone navigate a consulting group? It seems that it would be different than an agency.
You're correct. They are different. I mean, I think Accenture is sort of playing on now a little bit, sort of crossing over the chasm to sort of help more on creative and execution. But I think consulting houses are more like, let me help build your platform. If you want to bring a system in-house, let me help the connections from your DSP to your DMP to everything else. And they're also, the consulting houses are not taking ownership of media and therefore not taking any percentage from the middle. So in some ways they're complementary, but it's also, I think in some ways they're sort of morphing into one new entity that a marketer or CMO will use going forward.
So
there's not a simple solution about how to do this.
Right. So you have marketer, that consulting house, agency, who plays a much smaller part in some of that decisioning process, right? Because the consultant's kind of worked in. And then you have the rest of that.
And just think, and like, again, I had the little prediction up there. What if Accenture buys WPP and there was the consultants from Accenture into WPP to clean the entire thing? Like, that would be absolutely fascinating.
That I would subscribe to that show. I would watch that show religiously. That would be amazing to see. And I've said this before, is this is an industry, we as an industry need to have more financial rigor, right? There's definitely a part where, and I love to joke about the advertising industry. We're kind of like the liberal arts degree people who kind of found a home with something that's a little bit softer than finance. But that's not going to work. And I think someone with a consultant mindset walking into a company can certainly add more value to actually say, look, let me help you make these tough decisions and tie it that way versus this soft, let me help you get your brand.
And the other point I have here is I think agencies are going back to their roots, which is about creativity in the advertising ecosystem. Right. And consulting houses will never touch that.
Yeah, that's right. And that's obviously a huge area where I think we've long called for more creative. The canvas of advertising on the internet is not great. Obviously, as people are watching more video and whatever, you get to do the commercials. But if we can get agencies being focused on creative, we've got, as an overall industry, something more of a value there to present.
And again, I think you've mentioned this before. I think publishers should spend more time with consulting houses to find out how they can all work together.
Yeah. One of your other points you make here is the priority around first-party data from the marketer side, and that's the thing that I think there's probably a really big spectrum in companies that actually have first-party data.
If you have first-party data.
Right. To those who really, are going like, oh, great, that's what we're relying on is my CRM system. We're in trouble. And I'm just kind of curious, it'll be one of the things I think for us to watch is that evolution, right?
I think one of the most powerful marketing tools after Google search is advertisers taking their first-party CRM email addresses, uploading it to Facebook as the biggest example, targeting off of that, and then building lookalikes off of that. I think that is one of the most powerful marketing shifts we've seen in years, generations, and I think it's probably got one of the best ROI of anything out there in the world.
Yeah.
Absolute genius, and everyone's else just trying to emulate it, but no one can do it on Facebook because of Facebook's size and the value and the power of their data.
So let's talk publishers. Unless there's any other points you wanted to make. Woe is the publishers. Continual downward pressure on everything.
I know.
You make a point here about publishers and direct and branded content need to figure out how to better use Salesforce. That seemed like to me a very particular pointed note. So I wanted to point that one out.
Well, it's happened, and recently I've been hired by a couple of companies to help them with Salesforce.com, the Salesforce CRM platform, it's funny that you picked that out. And they bring me in to help because most companies still don't use it well after 15 or 20 years of having the CRM up and going. And to me, I say this like, a little bit funnily, but every CRM sucks. I think Salesforce.com sucks, right? But it's the best of the worst, and you have no choice but to use it. So you're not going to swap out CRM for something else. Like you're not going to swap out your double-click ad server for something else. So you really have to figure out how to use it the best. And ideally, Salesforce should be used for senior management and for the salespeople. And most of them don't use it well. I've only seen one company in my entire existence use Salesforce ridiculously well. You know who that is?
Who?
Salesforce.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like they're the best at using it. They're up here,
right?
And everyone else is up here.
It's so true, and I know that I used to say because I got approached by someone quite a while ago, and they said to me, we as a company have a Salesforce problem, and my initial response,
Salesforce problem, we'll go on.
Exactly, you have a cultural problem, you have a structural problem, you're banging your head against something that
yes.
You have other things to solve, but it's amazing that, to your point, I go from publisher to publisher, client to client, and whatever, and I talk to them, and they all have the Salesforce thing. It's just, it's there.
They write the same thing over and over and over.
Absolutely, yeah. That's maybe that should be my call. Is I need someone to present and talk about how they mastered Salesforce, and then they could be the Pied Piper.
You won't find anyone.
It's part of my job. Part of my job is to find them, right? But to your point, again, actually, really funny tangent on that is I remember when I was trying to find someone to talk about blockchain and media, and I couldn't find anyone. And now I can't get a dial tone without someone wanting to talk to me about blockchain and media.
But that was glamorous. Salesforce is not glamorous.
Absolutely right. Well, that's block and tackling. That's process. That's doing this right, and that's sometimes really hard for people. You also talk about the long-term revenue mix, a third subscription, third.
I think I had that in previous emails. I keep on leaving that one in because I think it's very aspirational where publishers need to be.
Yeah. I guess I look at it and go like, in that model, I don't disagree. I just think I look at it and go that you really have to have some kind of content that's unique, that demands it.
Yeah, you need amazing content that people are willing to pay for that you can't get anywhere else. And you just spend a fortune probably with, editors and writers building and maintaining that content.
Yeah, and having that and that wall kind of in place. But I think that obviously would be a great place to focus compared to some of the other things that you talked about. Content studios, I think, have worked for some. I don't know if you agree with that piece of it.
Well, content studios are the publishers just bringing in agency type resources in-house, right? The media business is like an 80 to 90% margin business. Content studios are 5 to 10 to 15%, right? They're very hard. It's very amorphous. You don't know what the KPI of the advertiser is. And I think there's a ton of churn happening throughout that whole brand, that whole category as well, where you get someone coming in for a quarter or two and then they churn because they didn't fulfill what they needed, but you don't even know what they needed to begin with.
Right. Interesting.
And then the other piece that I want to add here, and this is, I should have highlighted this one better. I think every publisher in 2019 needs to hire a VP of user experience. And I think what happened is the publishers forgot about the user sometimes. They spend so much time trying to make extra revenue in whatever they're doing with ads, adding more ads, refreshes. And again, they forgot about what the experience should be for the user coming to the site. And I think it's a fine line between making revenue and user experience, but I think they're going to realize I need someone always thinking about user experience to make my sites better so my users do come back more often.
I'm pausing only just because I want that to just stand there, right? So because I think I agree with you 1,000%.
Right, and there might be 20 jobs opening up next year for a VP of user experience for all these big publishers.
Yeah,
I don't know what the background of the person is, but it's going to be a really fascinating job to see if they can pull that off.
And to your point, they're going to have to be a VP level because if they're not at the table,
correct.
Right, it's not going to hold. I've seen product people, even in my role in ad operations, which sounds like it's in the past would be counterintuitive, but I've fought for the user, right? But there's always that part of that another paycheck, which means another ad on the page, which just takes you down the wrong path.
If you think about it, the platforms up above, they really do care about user experience for the most part.
They do.
And if they have so much inventory, it doesn't matter.
Right. But I think that goes to an underlying piece you've talked about of short-term thinking. You're just trying to make that.
Great. Everyone I know thinks about the day, the week, the quarter. They think about the year once during budgets, and they never think about 3 to 5 years anymore.
Yeah. So let's talk about. I think we've beat up enough on the publishers.
I don't think we beat them up.
No, I know. But let's talk about ad tech. Right. So
okay. My takeaway with ad tech is it's getting hard. It's slowing down. There's more consolidation. But I do think that the CTV, connected TV world is going to be huge in ad tech. And I think we had the pivot to this, the pivot to that. I think you're going to see the pivot to CTV and how that can actually compete or work with Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Roku, and how to make that work better.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting as someone who follows the industry, as an overall trade pub. It's not that there aren't a lot of things going on. GDPR and blockchain have sucked up a lot of the conversation, right? And not necessarily an AI, right? Not necessarily with results, more like speculation. And I think the area of OTT, CTV, and all of that stuff to me is an area where, again, I do feel like we're starting to see some progress. Like, it's still hard, but to your point, I think that there's a there more than I necessarily see in the short term blockchain or these.
Right, you sort of see a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, right?
Yeah. Like you start to see it, right? And that's the part where, to your point about blockchain, it's a technology.
It's just transparency.
Right.
That's all it is.
And
you shouldn't have to have blockchain if we were transparent to begin with.
Right. It's almost like we're trying to introduce, handcuffs into all of this just to see if we can tie everything together and go is that really what the right way to approach that? Yeah. The other one that popped up to me was the need for a DSP for small business. And I was just kind of curious as to where that came from.
So think about it. I'm a small business. My friend Dan Ballister running a hot sauce company in South Carolina. Okay. And I want to advertise. What am I going to do? I go to Facebook. I buy Facebook. I might buy some Instagram, maybe Audience Network. Who knows? I could buy Google search. What do I do for programmatic ads? I have no place to go. Right. So I think you need a free DSP for small businesses who spend a couple $1,000s a month to be able to buy programmatically. That does not exist today.
Interesting.
So I think that's a void in the marketplace. That's what I meant by that piece.
Got it. Well, we'll leave that out there, and maybe next quarter we're talking about someone getting into that space. My background is on the local newspaper side, right? And that was something I was always trying to think about as solving for local. Again, I don't think it, as you expand beyond ad tech into retail and some of the other things that you've talked about, covering and whatever, I would love to get more conversations about local and hyper local, because I find it fascinating. If anything, I worry about the florist down the road, right? Because again, as Amazon and Walmart and all these other things play into it, there's a part of our society we're missing. So I'm getting philosophical, so I'll stop. But they're local.
Okay, that's a great segue to my bonus number one.
That's right. Let's go to that.
Okay, so this is I put this list in here probably a year ago, and I've updated it since, and I sort of think it's kind of interesting to think about. For all those people listening or reading, if you want to get out of ad tech, whatever ad tech is, right, these are some related industries that I think you can move into tangentially without doing something completely different. So, example, if you're in ad tech right now, you're going to have a hard time, being a product manager for an auto company. Right? You're going to have a hard time going to finance, doing mergers and acquisitions, right? But there's some tangential links. So I'll go through a couple here. Direct to consumer again, right? That's a growing field. It's interesting. They need a lot of marketing spend. People from ad tech can go there. Anything voice and podcasts. Go work for the triopoly, or go work for an agency or consulting house. Go work for Salesforce, like we mentioned before. Those companies are not going away. And at the bottom, I have my newer ones. The connected TV world, I think, is still growing. That's an interesting one, not moving, and there's a sort of a confined number of partners in there. Esports, I love. I have no clue to monetize it yet. I think it's getting bigger and bigger, and I think when you actually have esports, I should probably watch, I'll do it right now, esports/gambling, taking edits in real time, right? I think that's an interesting place. And I think drones are interesting. My friend always brings up drone law and whatever that means. Think about Amazon drone packages, right? Drones in the air, what happens when, especially if he says someone in South Carolina shoots down a drone, was buzzing over my house, what do you want me to do? And the last one I have is driverless cars, which is a generation away, but interesting place to get into. I'm going to find these more and more and go into more detail. I just think you have to, the advice I always give people is don't think about your next job. Think about the job after that, right? So if you're in a job you don't like right now, get that next job, but make sure it's to the one after that that's going to get you to what you want to do. Because sometimes making that leap to ahead is very hard.
That's great advice. I love that.
Yep.
I love that.
And that's another great segue to my bonus number 2, which I'm going to try to do every quarter now. It's someone I know who was in ad tech who left, and I have here for better pass, and then went into a non-ad tech company. So this is my friend Rob Daniel, and you see below and read it. He took interviewing as a full-time job. He interviewed with 40 plus companies over a 90-day period and spoke with 60 plus recruiters until he finally found the job out of ad tech, working for Data Camp, which is educational technology. And I'm so proud of him for doing that. And he, again, this was not easy. You can't just look for the next job if you want to get out of ad tech by someone just coming to knock at your door. You have to proactively go and look for it, and it is not hard. I'm sorry, it's not easy. It is ridiculously hard, as you saw what he had to go through.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. And it's, yeah, you really have to look at it and go, think of it this way, like especially ad tech, ad operations specifically,
right?
Very nebulous job, right? You know, if you think about what we've had to do in our job as we kind of connect things that should be done automatically but aren't, right? From sales or whatever. We, you know, was that movie, The Office Space? We're the guys who take the information from the customer and tell it to the engineers. And someone goes like, why wouldn't they just talk to the engineers? Yeah. And you're like, because I've got people skills, right? That's the story we tell of ourselves, right? And it's, to your point, again, go to any cocktail party, talk to someone outside the industry, try to explain what you do. You can't. So how do you think that plays to recruiter when you're trying to look at other industries, right?
And Rob was in ad tech for 17 years. And now he's doing ed tech for a SaaS company that's not advertising related. And I think again, it was not easy.
So somehow I think this conversation will eventually be about us trying to be the lifeboat, you know, to some people to get out. There will be ad tech, right? There will be. It's
not going away. I just think it was not as, you know, 5 years ago. I think I said this before. 5 years ago, my kids like, go into ad tech. You'll have a career forever. Today, we won't say that.
Right. It's absolutely. So let's hit on the last bonus piece.
Bonus number 3. We're going to be like 40 minutes, which is the perfect amount of time. I wrote this one 3 days ago. So I think AppNexus becomes the first self-serve free DSP for connected TV. So what that means, if you're an advertiser today and you want to buy CTV, you have to go through a bunch of third parties. I think AppNexus, AT&T, is going to shut down the SSP. They're going to take the AppNexus DSP, which was great back in the day. They're going to take all the engineers inside AppNexus, throw it all against the DSP. They're going to make it great. They're going to focus on video/CTV. They're going to make it free. You're allowed to be able to buy through the AppNexus free DSP DirecTV local spots initially. That's what they get at the top of the hour. And then you'll be able to buy through the AppNexus DSP free all the Turner content. Okay? And I think the CPMs, as I heard in, I think, one of the AT&T conversations, CPMs go up 3 to 5 times when you could actually buy on an audience, and that's what's going to happen. So at first, I didn't like the move. As I thought about it, I'm like, wow, it's a really interesting play if it goes down this path. And then the one thing I did ask myself is, why would they not buy the Trade Desk? Because I think the Trade Desk is a better DSP. But then again, I think that price tag is 4 to 6 billion versus 1.6 billion, and that probably does make a big difference after spending 80 whatever billion on Time Warner.
What do you think then happens to all the other things that AppNexus does?
Slowly shut them down, wither away, sell them to a third party. I don't think AT&T cares about that in the long run. I think they care about making more advertising revenue in the CTV world. Therefore, the AppNexus DSP makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely interesting for them and for AppNexus with that strategy. Again, I'm processing. Again, this news is new, and your perspective on that is
all
new.
Right, because when I sent you my draft, this wasn't in there. This is new. This is real time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, so first of all, we're about right where we wanted, where we were aiming. We're getting good at this, and our segues are getting better.
Yep.
Get a little bit better control on the camera. Switching back and forth. We'll keep working on it. I'll paint the walls behind me. You at least have different locations, so I'll
try to be a different location every time. How about that?
Yeah, and we will do this in person as well. And listen, again, great information. Matt, thank you for putting this together. Again, if you're watching this video and you've watched this long and you don't know what we're referencing, get on the email list. Everything I will publish will link to your address, so you can get out on the mailing list.
And again, I still send this old school email. Eventually, one day I'll have a website. You can get it from there. But right now, it's old school email.
Yeah, it works, right? I think the piece of it too is going to be, I think you're always open to people responding.
Oh, I love feedback.
Get the feedback and great stuff. And so, Matt, with that, happy 4th, and we will talk. Maybe later in the quarter potentially, and we'll just.
We're gonna definitely do the advertising and marketing publicly traded companies, and we might do a retail one as well.
Fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.